Allie with PotomacBeads. Join me in making this pretty Par Puca cab pendant called the Star Pendant. Thanks for Puca for the fun design. Gather up your materials, and if you need any, check the links below the video, which have the date and that little show more button. Click there and you'll get links to all of the products. So to begin, I have an 18-inch cab here in the Opaque Amethyst Picasso. That's a Puca cab. And I have 48 of my Delica beads in the Duracoat Galvanized dark mauve color, Miyuki brand. And I'm going through, after adding 48 beads to my 5 feet of beading thread, I'm going through and I'm sewing back through the first bead to circle it out. Now I did also add a little stop bead there, so my thread won't be an issue. From here, you're going to continue for a total of 5 rows of your peyote stitch to create the bezel to go around the cabochon. What you're going to do is you have one bead that you add, skip the next one in line, so I'm coming through bead number 1, I skip bead number 2, and I'm going through bead number 3. Because there are 48 beads, I'm going to be adding 24 in this row around. Take a bead, skip the next one there, bead number 4, sew through bead number 5. So you're always going to be coming out the odd number bead and sewing a bead on top of the even number. You can see there how you're going to get a stack then of 2, 1, 2, 1. Continue the whole way around until you do add those 24 extra beads to that original row of 48. And that will actually accomplish our first 3 out of 5 rows of our Delica in our peyote stitch. As you complete your row here and adding your 24th bead, you're going to be going through bead number 1 that your thread was coming out of. At the same time, go through bead number 1 of your row of 24 that you just added. So you're sewing on a diagonal through bead number 1 from the first row, right after that stop bead, and then also through bead number 1 of what is actually the 3rd row. When you do the peyote stitch, you're actually starting with 2 rows. So that 48 was 2 rows at once. From here, we're going to start to get a cylindrical shape basically and have this be almost tubular. I'm going to add another 2 rows of 24. After completing this row of 24, I'll be coming out of this same bead here, and I'll step up through the first bead that I just am adding now. Once I'm done with row number 4, I'll also do the same thing till I have 5 rows of this peyote stitch. I'm starting number 4, and then I have 1 more row of 24 to do after that till I have 5 rows of this Delica stitch. As you're going in and adding this 4th row, one thing to be aware of is that if you need more help with the peyote bezel, we have tons of videos on that. Basically, as you go around adding in your beads, you're going to catch on to each of those 24 beads that you added in the previous 3rd row. You add a bead, sew through the next bead in line. Basically, you're just filling in that gaps. And then as you do the 4th, you'll notice that instead of having a group of 2, 1, 2, 1, you're starting to establish that group of 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, going the whole way around the design. Once you finish up row 5, you'll end up with 3, 2, 3, 2, 3, 2 in the rows of the peyote stitch. When finishing this 4th row, again, I'm coming out through bead number 1 of the row before in that 24, and then I'm also coming out bead number 1 from the 4th row that I just completed. As I do the 5th again, one more time, you'll start to get, as you skip over and sew in between, adding 1 bead between each of those 24 beads, you'll start to get 2, 3, 2, then the next one will be 3. I'm going to continue around, adding in 22 more beads to get that 5th row of my peyote stitch to set my bezel for my cabochon. Once you finish adding your 5 rows of your peyote stitch in your 11-0 Delicas, you're going to switch to 2 rows on each side of 15-0 seed beads. I'm using the Duracoat Opaque Moody Blue in the Miyuki brand, and coming out through that first bead in row number 5 after stepping up, I'm going to add 1 of my 15-0, sew through bead number 2, add a 15, sew through bead number 3. So you can see how the smaller bead is going to start slowly pulling it in towards the center. After you get 2 rows in, then you'll get a nice kind of encapsulation of those beads along the side of the pendant. We're going to do 2 rows to the front, and then I'll show you how we're going to get to our 2 rows to the back. So after finishing up our 2 rows of our peyote stitch, what I'm going to do after those 2 rows of 15s is I'm going to sew to the other side. Going on a diagonal, I'm coming out of one of my 15-0s there at the very end, so bead number 1. I'm going to sew right along the piece in a diagonal, so you can see right there that diagonal line. We're going to take our needle and thread through there. If you want, sometimes you can get it through straight in a line. Sometimes you need to come out through every one of your Delica beads. So it doesn't want to cooperate with me, so I'll come out each one of my rows, coming out my beads, and then getting it to the front of the design. I will go through then, and kind of this acts to tighten it up. We're also going to be adding an additional row of our 15s after we get through the front portion here. So this is actually going to be the back, and we're sewing through along that diagonal line to the front. When we come out the front here, what I want you to do is 2 more rows of your Delicas, or I'm sorry, of your 15-0s. So you're going to end up having your cab sit in there. I want you to do 2 15-0 rows of your peyote stitch. That first row, you don't need to worry too much about having the cab sit in there. The second one, as we do, we want to make sure to drop your cab in and start to pull nice and tight. So I'm exiting through one of those exterior Delica beads, and I'm going to start with a row of my 15-0s. After you're done the front, what you're going to do is flip over the cabochon and come to the back. What we're going to be doing is, I've already done it once, we add 1 15-0 coming out one of those 15-0s along the back, and then you sew through 2 15-0s that are already there. Pull nice and tight. Again, add 1 15-0, sew through the next 2 15-0s. So you're going to go around cutting this down from 24 to 12 beads. As the last thing then, to finish up the bezeling portion of it, we're going to go back through all of those 12 beads, just doing a nice tight pull to get that bezel even tighter around the back. After you're done tightening up the back there, what you're going to do is come out the 3rd row of the peyote stitch that's closest to the top. So you're going to go through, or the 3rd row of Delicas. So you're going through one of your 15-0s to step back. Then you're going through a row of your Delicas. You're going to come out that 3rd row. So we're going to go through row number 1, row number 2, and then we're going to come out row number 3. That's going to put us right in the middle of our Delica section of our peyote bezel. When going through here, you're going to pick up 3 of your 15-0 seed beads, sew through the next Delica bead in that line. So basically, when you look back at your Delicas, you always have a row of 3. You're going to sew through each one of that, adding in 3 beads to sit as a little picot trim. Again, add 3 beads, sew through the next one in line. So you're just going through right along that peyote stitch, just sewing through just the middle, adding in those 3 beads. You can see that's going to get you a nice little point on the exterior, and we're going to go in and continue to add in 3 of the beads between each one of my 24 beads in that center row. After we finish going around and putting our little picot trim in, what we're going to want to do is exit through the top of our first 15-0 that we added, that little picot trim. We're going to exit through bead number 2, which is going to be right there at the top. I have some 11-0 seed beads in the matte opaque turquoise color, and then my Minos beads. I'm going to alternate picking up one of my 11-0s, sewing through the top of all of those picot trims, and then after that, add one of my Minos beads. If you're unfamiliar with Minos, they're a one-hold barrel-shaped puca bead, and we want it to sit so it looks like just that little dot face up. We have one 11-0 that goes on, and then I sew through the next peak. Another one of my Minos goes on. So you're going to end up with a total of 12 of your Minos beads and 12 of your 11-0 seed beads. I'm going to continue sewing around, adding in the Minos and the 11-0s. Once you're finished coming out of your last Minos bead, you add your last one in here, and then I want you to sew through that first 15 and come out that first 11, just like you're stepping up in the pattern. From here, we're going to alternate a design, and I want you at first to do 3 of your Minos with a 15-0 between each one. Got one extra 15-0 here on the end. I'm going to take that guy off. So you're going to end up with Minos, 15, Minos, 15, Minos. Sew over to the next 11-0, which is what we're going to catch on with every one here. Make sure as you're doing this that you make your Minos sit in order so that way they have that nice little triangle there. From here, we're going to do 2 more additions. And what we're going to do here as we do the additions is we are going to add just a Minos. So we're going to add 1 Minos, sew through the Minos that's already there. Again, make sure to pull it so that way it sits correctly. Coming out the Minos, add 1 more Minos, and sew through the 11-0. Again, make sure that Minos is sitting exactly the way that you want it to, and then proceed on. So now I'm back to my Minos, 15, Minos, 15, Minos. Sew through, skipping over that Minos bead, sew through the next 11-0. That gets your next point to your star. And now I'm going to again add 2 more Minos and sew through the Minos that's there. Continue this pattern the whole way around, getting that nice star design. So if you continue around with the Minos, just to show that they're starting to lay, and I actually started taking mine off thinking maybe it was driving me crazy, but it's not a big deal. It is hard to get them to lay, I'm not gonna lie, but the most important thing is to get them to lay down flat as you are doing them. So if they're not laying correctly, take them off, add it back on, and go in and force them to lay correctly. Before you're done with each one of your Minos beads, go ahead and make sure that the thread's not twisted at all, that your Minos is sitting straight up, and give a nice tight yank on your thread so that way when you put it down, it doesn't have any waffling effect. So you want to make sure to do that as you're going around. As you go around too, and you're making sure that those Minos are sitting in place, you can also think about changing up the design if you want to. In place of where these 2 Minos here are on the sides, you can, if you want to, add in some of your Delica bead in that bronze color, adding 2 in and then going through the Minos, 2 and coming out. That'll actually accentuate that star design a little bit and keep the tension that is needed in order to keep those Minos in place. Once you're done adding your Minos in, you can choose if you want to go around the entire area here and then decorate with 5 15-0s around all the little points of the star. I actually prefer to keep them open, but I am going to add some 15-0s to be a nice bail at the top here. I've gone through, I've added my last bead here coming out through my 11-0, and going into the top bead here, I'm going to sew through my first bead, go through and add in my second, coming out the top there, add 10 of my 15-0s, and circle through that top Minos again. You can add a jump ring then if you want. You can keep it open and attach a strand to it or attach a nice chain. And then you can sew down into the project a couple stitches in order to tie off the thread. If you want to, you can also reinforce that loop so you have 2 threads going through, since that's where it's going to have the most tension. After you reinforce, I'm going to flip my little pendant over here and sew through a couple rows of my peyote stitch in order to get it nice and tight, so I can bring my thread back, sew through 1 here of my Delica beads and out. And then because it's the back, I'm going to sew back through that same exact Delica bead, almost acting like a stop bead, once, and then once again. Give a nice tight pull, and then I'm going to take my thread burner, wildfire cord cutter, and burn down the additional cord that's there. So with this pendant, there are a lot of variations that you can do as far as adding in some extra beads, having the nice star look with the Minos. If you don't have any Minos at home, you can also try some 2mm rounds for a completely different effect as well. So it's fun to see all of these different designs that Puca comes up with and how she utilizes and uses the beads together. Thanks so much for watching this star pendant, and thanks Puca for the fun pattern. Remember, if you do need any materials or want to check out the pattern, look at the links below to shop with us online. Hit that little show more button, expand it, and get the full list of materials that were used. Also, keep in mind, if you haven't yet, you can subscribe to get regular updates from us here at PotomacBeads so you don't miss any new ideas, new products, as well as Better Beater episodes. As always, thank you so much for watching and enjoy making this star pendant by Puca.